Good day. I'm Andrea Spindle, Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation and co-chair of End Jew Hatred Canada and moderator for today's panel. CAEF is a registered charitable organization committed to combating anti-Zionism, which is anti-Semitism and the most virulent form of it today. Jew hatred seems to have grown into an industry over the past year, so much so that ignorance of and hatred against Israel seems to occupy the lives of formerly rational people, including political pundits, journalists, academics, scientists, entertainers, actors, as well as comedians, and a host of artists in Canada and beyond. Many organizations are struggling to identify best strategies to combat such hatred and how best to educate people on truth, including the history of the Jewish people, root causes of anti-Semitism, and the legal rights of the Jewish people to Israel. CAEF is working to address these and other issues, and we work in collaboration with many other organizations and allies. Today's webinar is important to the Jewish community, and I thank our co-sponsors of this event who also agree this is a very important topic, both in Toronto, in Canada, and beyond. We're very pleased to have synagogue partners because they do understand the importance of this webinar. We recognize that Jewish institutions have been particularly vulnerable to anti-Semitic attacks. This webinar features experts who will describe the threats and what they are doing and what we can do about them to ensure our own safety. CAEF needs your financial support to continue to bring timely information to the attention of the Jewish community and to the non-Jewish community. We organize direct action and take advocacy positions to support our community and to encourage all organizations and all levels of all governments to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. If you'd like to support us, please donate by going to www.caef.ca/donate. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to everyone who's registered and will be posted on our website so you can see it again later and share it with your friends and family. I now have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. And I want to start by thanking these gentlemen for what they do to keep our community safe. Ryan Clow is the Senior Director, Community Security at UGA Federation of Greater Toronto. Ryan served as an infantryman in the Canadian Army between 1996 and 2004. In 2004, he left the Army to join the Department of National Defence, and from 2006 to 2012, he worked in Canadian Special Operations Forces Command. Ryan was awarded the Southwest Asia Service Medal with Afghanistan Bar for a deployment to Kandahar in 2008, providing intelligence support to combat operations. Ryan was also awarded the Distinguished Service Medallion for his role in the development of Canada's first ever counterterrorism strategy. He completed undergraduate studies at the University of Ottawa and a Master's of Arts from Royal Military College, and he's authored several articles in various professional and academic journals. Welcome, Ryan. Superintendent Ricky Veerappan has been a member of the York Regional Police for the past 33 years and is currently the commanding officer of community services. His portfolio includes community engagement and well-being, the mental health support teams, youth engagement, the community safety village, diversity, equity, inclusion, and hate crime prevention. He also served 10 years as a police crisis and hostage negotiator. Superintendent Veerappan currently leads the York Region Police Human Rights Education Center, and he presented at the United Nations Youth for Human Rights International Conference in July 2018 and the United Nations Institute for Training and Research Interfaith Dialogue in February 2019. Superintendent Veerappan holds a master's degree in conflict analysis and management, specializing in political, ethnic, and security issues from Royal University in Victoria, BC. And he's also a graduate of the University of Toronto's Joseph Rotman School of Management Police Leadership Program. Ricky's also a graduate of the 2018 Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police Executive Global Studies Programming, focusing on equity, inclusion, and fundamental respect in the diverse police organization. Welcome, Ricky. Carmi Levy is a Canadian technology journalist and analyst whose coverage focuses on identifying technology-related stories that most significantly impact our day-to-day lives and explaining tech issues in a meaningful, relatable, simple manner for diverse audiences. He has worked extensively with CTV News, the CBC, and the Canadian Press, and his bylines have appeared in a wide range of publications, including Yahoo, Canada Finance, the Toronto Star, and others. As an industry analyst, Carmi is focused on mobility, infrastructure, regulatory issues, and cybersecurity, and their combined impact on businesses, particularly in the financial and public sectors. He has worked extensively with some of Canada's largest companies. Carmi graduated from Concordia University's journalism program. His personal and professional mission is to empower others to get more out of technology and to use it to improve their lives and the world around us. I'd also like to introduce Anita Bromberg, who will be joining us at the Q&A portion. Anita is the president of CAEF, and she will facilitate the latter part of this webinar. If you have a question, please use the Zoom Q&A function, and Anita will identify and direct questions to specific guests. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me in Zoom land. And to begin, we'll call upon Ryan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving your time to be here today on such an important subject. As Andrea mentioned, I'm going to cover three major questions in about 10 minutes. So first is there a threat to the Jewish community? Second being, what are we doing about it, particularly my organization, UJA? And then what can you do about it? Because I think there is a role for everyone to play and everybody should find that role. Is there a threat to the Jewish community in the GTA? So I think the short answer is yes, but I believe we need to look deeper to understand what that threat is, understand it, and how it affects us. The first thing to recognize is that the threat can change quickly and without notice. We saw this recently in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The most likely threat we assess to the community is crime, and particularly anti-Semitic crime. In pure numbers, according to local police statistics from both YRP and Toronto Police Service, the Jewish community in the GTA has been the most targeted group for hate-motivated crime for several years. In 2020, we saw an overall number increase in Toronto, for example. But when we dive a bit deeper, we uncover key aspects of the threat that are extremely informative. So for example, when it comes to anti-Semitic crime, there's typically a seasonal cycle. More things happen in the warmer months. What we expect to see in terms of this threat is the ongoing nature of it will be generally sporadic and opportunistic targeting of the community, with more occurring in warmer months and in response to significant events. So now let's shift some gears. We're going to look at what we think the most dangerous threat is, and that is the violent anti-Semitic attack to several tragic examples around the world, including Pittsburgh, Poway, Jersey City, Muncie. The overall typology for this most dangerous threat are the lone actor with lone tech weapons, meaning guns, knives, vehicles, against targets of opportunity and soft targets. What this means is these attacks are difficult, if not impossible, to predict or interdict, including the day, time, or location. In terms of these crimes, we're obviously most conscious around Hagin. And I think that's appropriate because of the symbolism of those days and the history of attacks on those days. What we can't lose sight of, though, when it comes to threat, is that it's the attacker that ultimately chooses when they attack. What that means is any day could be that day. With all this said, I want to reinforce that the GTA remains by far one of the safest places in the world for Jews to live. So what are we doing about it? And again, this is my organization, UJA. We have a multifaceted response to anti-Semitism that includes critical advocacy work, educational initiatives, and community security. Today, I'm only speaking about community security because that's what I do. We've developed a comprehensive security program for the community over the past 2 years. That includes hiring a full-time team of professionals that do nothing else than community security. We're currently a team of 3, and we're hiring 4 more in the next few weeks with plans to grow even larger in the future. Our mission is straightforward, simple, but powerful. It's to protect Jewish life and the Jewish way of life. It's based on best practices from Jewish community security groups around the world. In that regard, when we first started, we took trips to places like Pittsburgh, Paris, and London to learn firsthand. The core best practice is that community members are active participants in their own security. That doesn't mean taking the law into our own hands, and far from it. We place an incredibly high value on our relationship with police. We work daily with officers such as Superintendent Veerappan to ensure police have full transparency and to affect a high level of coordination in everything we do. What we do is focus on those few precious minutes before help can arrive that can make the difference between life and death. Our program is based on 4 key pillars of security, namely awareness, training, procedures, and physical security measures. The aim is to provide knowledge, skills, and ultimately the confidence for community members to live a safe, healthy, and proud Jewish life. And when I say healthy, that also means your mental health and how you go about every day, that you're not afraid to be a Jew in our city. The vast majority of the program is available to community organizations at no cost. So what can you do? And I think this is very important because I think everybody has a role. We're looking to change the community security culture, one that's not afraid or paranoid, one that's confident and informed and aware. So first thing you can do, take basic precautions. For example, when you're out, be aware. Know where you can get help. Get involved. Ask your community organizations that you're involved with, whether that's your synagogue, your child or grandchildren's school, if they've joined the UJA Community Security Program. If they haven't, strongly ask them to consider it. And if they have, ask how you can actually get involved. And finally, if you're the victim or witness to any anti-Semitic crime or suspicious activity, you need to report that to the police and to UJA. That means before or instead of posting to social media. If we don't report to police, and especially in a timely manner, we cannot expect them to act. We are part of the solution. By reporting to us, after you've reported to police, you support the community. We use that information in our threat analysis to help update and inform our training and to help shape the communications that we provide to our community. If you are not the victim or witness or have no clear line of sight to the incident, and especially before you post to social media, exercise some basic discretion. Does what you're about to post sound credible? Ask the person you receive it from if they are the victim or witness. Ask them if it's been reported to police. And if any of those answers are no, then I would strongly encourage you to consider the impact of what you're about to post. The final comment I'd like to say is, while this is a discussion about anti-Semitism, the fact that non-Jews are here standing side by side with you, you should hopefully take some comfort that you are not alone in Canadian society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate that. And I think some of the questions that follow will be specific to how people can themselves do more. Ricky, I'd like to call on you now. Please unmute.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Andrea and the team for the invitation for York Regional Police to be a part of this this very, very important session. What I'd like to speak about as it relates to our topic of discussion today really focuses on also in 3 areas. One is really just providing a context for those who may not be familiar with the type of environment that we serve within the regional municipality of York. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about our engagement with Jewish communities within York region and the work that we've done over the years, and also some tips as to what community members can do in combating hatred and in working together to combat hate and hate crime. So for those that may not know, the regional municipality of York in Ontario, Canada, is truly what we see as a microcosm of the world, with a strong legacy of Indigenous history, traditions, culture, as well as residents who trace their heritage and ancestry to literally all corners of the world. We have many different races and religions and ethnicities and cultures, belief systems, nuances, value systems, and all of these things which intersect within our region. And within this region, We have an incredible amount of human diversity, and we see diversity as a strength within our region. In addition to that, we have over 300 places of worship within York Region, reflective of just about every major world faith tradition as well, including a number of synagogues and a number of Jewish institutions. Approximately 25,000 members of Jewish communities live within York Region, and those numbers continue to change and fluctuate and grow. So our work in this particular area is really focused on building strong relationships. Now, I've had the privilege of working in this particular area for a number of years, and through that work, we've had the opportunity to work with hate crime investigation teams, to do work in hate crime prevention as well. And in fact, I'll tell you, with regards to the hate crime work, our response to hate crime starts off with a very, very robust model that we use for hate crime investigations here at York Regional Police. We have a central hate crime unit, which is made up of a detective and 2 detective constables, followed by 5 police districts in which we have designated hate crime investigators. These investigators are trained specifically in the area of hate crime investigations, because ultimately, when we're dealing with hate crime, we're dealing with a crime against shared and collective identity, where one person may be the target, but an entire community is victimized. And we've seen this historically, as Ryan had mentioned, with increases in hate crime in the region over a number of years, but particularly anti-Semitic type hate crime, Islamophobic, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, homophobic and transphobic, and anti-Indigenous hate crime as well. So we've seen all of those types of things. But our response to hate crime within York Region and dealing with hate in York Region includes ongoing training and education for our police officers and community, and the prosecution of hate crime to the fullest extent of the law, while incorporating hate crime prevention programs and initiatives, and working closely with religious, racial, cultural, and ethnic leaders in communities that are targeted by hate. So this model, which has been closely aligned with the model that you would find at the United Nations, the Office of Genocide Prevention model, also places a great emphasis on education and creating opportunities for members of our human family to deconstruct and transcend obstacles to realizing the full potential of shared humanity. So in addition to a strong enforcement arm, we have a strong section that focuses on the education and the prevention, and also the work that we do in early intervention. So our commitment to safety and security and safeguarding all of the multiple expressions of human diversity in what we see as a vibrant and dynamic community remains second to none. And in this regard, our work specifically with Jewish communities over a number of years, at least 25 years within York Region, includes a number of things. And I just want to touch on some of these things just so you can get a sense of the work that we've been doing here over many, many years. We have many members of York Regional Police who have Jewish ancestry. And amongst many of the 56 languages that York Regional Police members speak, one of them does include Hebrew. So we have members who speak Hebrew and who help us out with those connections and maintaining those connections in the communities. We've worked with Max Eisen, a Holocaust survivor, for a number of years, helping us with training and education particularly for our hate crime teams. Max has been also recognized at International Day events that we've held in York Region. And most recently, about a year and a half ago, we opened up one of our community rooms in our police station in his honor, named the Max Eisen Community Room. And Max was there with us to open that up. We've worked very closely over the years with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, B'nai B'rith, B'nai B'rith, the Canadian Jewish Congress in its early days, as well as Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. We have Jewish representatives on our Investigative Services Liaison Committee as part of our Places of Worship tours that we take officers around our region to learn about religious and spiritual diversity. Also a trip that we take hate crime investigators on to learn about religious diversity and some of the nuances and belief systems when it comes to investigating hate crimes. We've done multiple visits to Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform synagogues in York Region. We've taken our members on Holocaust Museum visits in the city of Toronto. again, learning about the Holocaust and its lasting impact on so many members of our Jewish communities. We have two rabbis as part of our 10-member chaplaincy program, Rabbi Mendel Kaplan and Rabbi Corey Weiss. And again, they assist us greatly in helping us understand some of the context and the nuances and the very intricacies of Judaism and how it relates to policing. We also worked very closely a number of years ago with on a countering violent extremism strategy with Dr. Abby Korb, who was employed by York Regional Police, really helping us work on this on the strategy. We do menorah lighting ceremonies every year, and we've done that for the past 17 years at York Regional Police. We engage with the Yom HaShoah. In fact, Anita Bromberg, during a time at B'nai B'rith many years ago, would invite our hate crime teams to participate in the ceremonies, and that was an incredibly significant event for us to be engaged in. Every year, we provide letters of support for critical infrastructure to many places of worship across the region, including many synagogues and Jewish institutions. And we work in collaboration with Ryan Clow's team to provide that through the UJA Federation and certainly provide the supports. We provide letters of safe and vital communities where communities are helping secure their premises through security infrastructure and programs like that. We also have additional patrols and a heightened state of alert during the significant holidays like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Purim with our particular ride programs. We've done multiple meetings with security at Lebovic, at the Lebovic Center, as well as other synagogues, all initiated by Ryan and his excellent security team. We've had our members attend Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for hate crime training programs, had meetings with the Consul General of Israel on issues specific to enhancing the quality of life for members of Jewish communities within York Region. We've been engaged with a Tour of Humanity bus training from the Simon Wiesenthal Center and had that come out specifically for our hate crime investigators and also on other occasions for broader communities. York Regional Police most recently participated in March in the International Mayors Conference in combating anti-Semitism. And certainly we have a program called Project Ready, which is the heightened state of patrols focusing when we're dealing with international conflict. So essentially, the strategy that we use at York Regional Police is policing with a global mindset, recognizing that global conflicts and international events certainly have a tremendous impact on communities. And it's important for us to understand context, histories, nuances, belief systems, and all of those wonderful attributes of human diversity, but most importantly, distill it down to issues of safety and security for all members within York Region. I will also touch a little bit about just speaking about some of the tips that we would be able to share in terms of what are things that community members can do. You know, and I'll tell you, when we're dealing with hate crime, certainly, again, as we say, a crime against shared and collective identity, one of the most important things we would talk about in empowering people is knowing the jurisdiction that you're living in and where this is happening. So knowing the police jurisdiction, and in our particular case, it's York Regional Police. We are directly north of the city of Toronto for those that may not know where we are, but know the police jurisdiction that you're in. Know how to call 911 should it be a life-threatening type of a situation. Also know the non-emergency number for your local police service. If you're engaging with police officers to report hate crime or hate incidents, get the name of the officer and the badge number. Every officer has a name and a badge number. Get a report number or a general occurrence number. Also, if you're able to engage in police advisory committees, and you may find those in various police organizations, not only in York Region, but across the GTA or Greater Toronto Area and Ontario, Canada, and perhaps in other parts outside of Canada as well. So these are some of the things that are very, very important for people to engage in. As a member of a community, if you're part of a ratepayer group, connect with your local police service and ask about crime prevention type programs, neighborhood watch programs, knowing your neighbors, getting to know your neighborhood. we at York Regional Police, we have a camera registry program, which is designed not to violate any of your personal information that you have on your cameras, but really to assist police when we're dealing with some very complex investigations. Sometimes just being able to contact you to say, you know, we had a crime take place in a particular neighborhood. You're registered with the police. You've registered your camera with the police. Could you take a look at your camera footage? And if there's anything that you could share with us that could help us in investigating this crime, we'd be very, very appreciative of that. We've got officers that do crime prevention programs, and I would encourage you to get in touch with your local police service to help us connect with you to do these types of crime prevention programs on personal safety, on home security, and all types of other things as it relates to safety within our communities. So I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricky. Really appreciate it. I just want to add a comment. We recognize that we were selecting one regional police department to speak, but I want to emphasize that we see what you're doing as a model. We know we've got listeners from across North America and maybe even from outside of the continent. And we urge you to think about everything Ricky has said. You'll be able to listen to the video again, because these are ideas, concepts, practices that you can take to your local police and share some of the best models and best ideas. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. Now, Carmi, about technology and security.
Thanks very much for having me, Andrea. Thanks to the CAEF and the sponsoring organizations, as well as to Ricky and Ryan. I'm already learning a heck of a lot, so an honor to be here. You know, I want to talk about 4 really key things here today, and I'm under no illusions. This begins the conversation, and obviously, as questions come up, by all means, pose them here and share them. But you know, we will be reachable afterward as well. I think this is important that it's ongoing. But I want to focus on the role that technology plays in both facilitating Jew hatred and in our ability to counter it. There's a duality to all of these tools that we have today. On the one hand, it allows us to build community. It allows us to connect in ways that we could not connect before. But on the flip side, if it's available to us, it's also available to those who would perpetrate Jew hatred. And so we can assume, we know, we have the evidence that they are clearly using it for their purposes as well. And so it is beholden to us to recognize that and say, okay, we have this historically unprecedented power at our fingertips. How do we leverage it to ensure that the light outshines the darkness? And that's sort of the first sort of piece. I want to look a little bit more closely at what some of those online risks look like. You know, many of us use Facebook without even thinking about things like risk profiles, or who is out there, and what those threats look like or feel like. Would we even be able to identify if we are being targeted? What are the general online risks, as well as those that are specific to the Jewish community? You have to look at them. You can't look at them in isolation because they are intrinsically connected. Where do they come from? Who's responsible for them? What drives them? And how do we identify them? Because I mean, ultimately, that is the problem with many of the fastest rising forms of cyber attack today, is that we simply don't know what we're looking for because we're not taking the time to do so. And as anti-Semitism, both globally in the offline world as well as the online world, continues to grow, accelerate, become more aggressive, we need to become better at identifying what those signs of online activity are so that we can respond appropriately to it. We also want to look internally, and certainly not to imply that any of this is our fault, but many of the behaviors that we engage in online will expose us to unacceptable levels of risk. And so we need to start looking inward, pull up a mirror, look at how we are using these tools on a day-to-day basis, and start asking ourselves, what are the things that we're doing here that could make us somewhat more likely to be targeted in some way, either in a general manner or as a Jew online because you've been identified. And so these are the things that we need to be thinking about when we are online in any capacity, even if we're not involved in a conversation specific to Jew hatred in the community. We've got to be aware of this, just like we street-proof our kids and we were street-proofed ourselves as kids. We need to apply the same kind of logic to our online behaviors and recognize that we all have a role to play in reducing that risk profile and having a safer, online experience, but just as importantly, positioning ourselves so that we can respond appropriately to threats as they become apparent. And then finally, along that lines, what can we do as individuals? The specific things that we can do to reduce our risks, allow us to leverage these, let's call them what they are, miraculous technologies, so that we can then better serve as advocates within the Jewish community, allies, foot soldiers in the fight against anti-Semitism, while at the same time minimizing the potential for others to target us. And I think that's kind of the overall sort of focus is we have incredibly powerful tools. They have to be used properly. But let's kind of focus on that. And I think, we can certainly look at a platform like Facebook. It's wide open. It's a global architecture. It connects us to Jews elsewhere. But at the same time, it is a platform that is rife with cyber stalkers, phishing attacks, malware, identity theft. Ransomware in particular is one of the fastest rising forms of cyber insecurity in recent years, multi-billion-dollar industry. And unfortunately, anti-Semitic activity has tagged on to these, let's call them worst practices. And those who would perpetrate anti-Semitic attacks in the real world are recognizing these trends in the digital world, and they're taking advantage of them. And so, one of the things that we kind of want to understand is, what are the things that we are doing day to day that are unnecessarily exposing us to these kinds of risks? And so, for example, typical use case is, I'm a Facebook user, I go online, I fill out some of these, a survey because it's a fun kind of thing that I'm doing with my friends, but I'm unwittingly exposing some of my personal information in the process. And so when you answer these questions, what street did you grow up on? What's your mom's maiden name? What was the first car that you ever had? Or, identify the decade that you're from. It might seem innocuous, but when you kind of pull them all together, it allows those who would oppose you or us as a community to create a dossier of information that can then be used against us. Cyber criminals love data, and cyber criminals use very sophisticated means. In many cases, they're automated. It's not like someone is sitting at a computer and collecting this. They write a script, they embed it on a website somewhere on the dark web, and it just reaches out and automatically harvests all this information that we are sending out there. And so what that does is it gives data to those who would target us. And today we're talking about anti-Semitic activity, but the truth of the matter is this is a global scourge. And on any given day, at any given moment, Ryan said, it's when they decide to act, they can act against us in that way, and we're essentially giving them the ammunition to do so. So, first thing is take a look at our online behaviors, look at our personal level of sharing, ask ourselves, what are we liking? Who are we interacting with? What are we sharing? In what context? What are we members of? What is visible publicly versus what is not? And let's not assume that just because something is quote unquote private, that it is in fact shielded from someone. In other words, if it's really that sensitive, should you be sharing it digitally in any form? Because even a Facebook private group isn't necessarily private. It's fairly easy for someone, if they want to perpetrate anti-Semitic activity, fairly easy for them to infiltrate a group like this and start harvesting from the inside. So start looking at your sharing profile and start reducing it. Look at that sort of where you're, obviously online forums are a tremendous source of community, of connection, of engagement, of learning. And certainly in my own journey, I use them as part of my own strategy to build skill as someone who can, a member of the community to combat anti-Semitism. But at the same time, recognize that every time you join something, that's another data point for someone else to potentially use against you. So every once in a while, conduct an audit of what you are a member of, what you are in, what groups you're part of, and ask yourself, is it still adding value to my online activity? Is it exposing me to unnecessary risk? Is there activity there that seems a little bit iffy? Because if that's the case, unselect yourself from it, pull yourself out of it, conduct a regular triage process so that you're not casting the widest possible net. You're only engaging in the digital resources that bring you value, because if something is sitting unused out there, it exposes you as a potential target. You also want to make sure that the messages that come into you, and this may not seem like something that is of concern, but it absolutely is. You get a message in your inbox and your first inclination is, ooh, I got an email or I got a text message, I've got to answer it. We need to disabuse or disconnect from that assumption that every message needs to be responded to, because as ransomware and other forms of this type of state-sponsored cyber terrorism are on the rise, they're using this as a way of coming in under the radar. If you click on that link and it is in fact an illegitimate message, you're not going to be taken to a website where you're going to learn something. You're going to be taken to a website that's going to install malware, compromised software on your device. And then of course, then that's when the fun begins. That's how hackers get in. That's how those who would target the Jewish community try to get in under our personal radar. And so the way to combat that is don't answer anything that you're not sure about on your smartphone, tablet, or other touchscreen device. Wait until you get to your laptop, wait until you get to your desktop computer, because then you can use the mouse to hover over the link or the button or the box, and then take a look at that address and ask yourself, does this look like a legitimate address? Are there extra characters in there? Does it look like the original domain? How many times have I gotten emails from the CIBC, but there are two B's in CIBC? So they slip one extra character into the web address. And if I click on that, I'm going to be in a world of hurt, even though the logo looks good, the text looks okay, everything else seems fine, but that address is wrong. So give yourself the opportunity to pause, check, and make sure that you're not specifically being targeted. We need to also disabuse ourselves of the notion that just because we've seen anti-Semitic activity online, we're going to dive into a forum, actively participate in that, and get everyone to see our way. We're never going to convince people to see our side online. Ask yourself if that is absolutely the way to proceed. In other words, is this the best path toward advocacy? In many cases, that is not the case. From an infrastructure perspective, and this may not seem related to what we're talking about here, but it absolutely is. The hardware that you use, the operating systems that make it come alive, the apps that you run on them, the state of them play a very strong role in the level of risk that you're associated with. So for example, if you have an old computer that uses an old version of Windows that has not been updated in years, you may want to just toss the machine now, because you are at huge risk of being targeted by those who know that you're kind of an easy mark. The truth of the matter is, whatever operating system you're using, iOS on iPhone, Android on a Google-powered phone, a Windows PC, or Mac OS on an Apple Mac, these major operating systems are updated regularly with security fixes, patches, things like that. And as the companies that are responsible for them become aware of the risks that are percolating out in the community, so they recognize that the way they designed it makes it particularly vulnerable to a certain kind of attack, they will release an update to it. This happens constantly. And so we need to be aware of that, because if we are running software that has not been patched, it's relatively easy for us to be targeted, again, by those who would target our community. And so the easiest way to sort of slam the door on individuals like that, or on those who would target us, is go into the settings and just make sure that auto update is on. That's it. And then every time a new version becomes available, you reduce the window of vulnerability, and you ensure that you won't be targeted via unnecessary backdoors. Same thing applies to apps on your device. Most of us use only 5 to 10 apps at any given time on our device, and then we have screens and screens and screens of other apps and services that we never use. They just gather dust in the digital back rooms. Get rid of them. Delete the accounts that are attached to them if you're not using them first, and then delete the apps themselves. The reason being, when breaches happen, the first thing that hackers will do, they'll of course share that information online. Your account information is now out there. They'll start hammering away at those accounts. And if you've left your account dormant out there, you are now a potential victim, and that can be used against you. And then this is the one that everyone hates the most. We call it password best practice. And this is the question that I get asked the most, because updating your passwords and keeping different passwords for different services and apps, of course, is a hassle. But passwords still represent the weakest link when it comes to digital security, and the easiest way that hackers know they can get in under our screen. So, 3 things that you need to remember: make sure that your password is hard to guess, so no pet names, no partner names, anything like that. Use upper and lowercase characters, numbers, special characters. I know it's hard, but the flip side is, if it's easy to guess, you're toast. Make sure that you're using passwords that are unique to each app, service, website that you subscribe to. The reason being, if you're using the same password across multiple services, guess what? When a breach happens, they're gonna sign into all of them, and you're not just going to be dealing with one attack; you'll be dealing with multiple. So unique passwords, and then change them regularly, and every month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever works for you. But do set a schedule. The reason being, if there is a breach, in many cases, a lot of people never change their passwords. And so, for example, the Yahoo breach was years ago. Do you know that there's still people out there who haven't changed their password in 5 years, which means that for 5 years, the front door is wide open. So the more frequently you change your password, the more frequently you are, in fact, closing those doors and ensuring that you're not vulnerable to the kind of attack that would make you, sort of have to essentially clean up your digital life. And there's another layer that we need to be aware of, and this is absolutely crucial for those of us who are identifiable online as potential targets. And I think it's safe to say that Jews qualify, whether we like it or not, is dual factor authentication. And that's basically a second digital lock on the front door. So in addition to a password, if you have dual factor or 2FA activated on an account, it'll also ask for maybe a facial recognition. So you'll have to hold your phone up to your face, or your fingerprint. You'll have to scan your fingerprint, or use a four-digit or a 6-digit PIN in addition to your password. And the reason this is critical is, well, if your password is breached, and in many cases it already is, they still won't be able to get in. And interestingly, Google, and you'll have to watch for this if you're using Google services, over the next few months, Google will be forcing everyone by default to have 2FA activated on all of their accounts. All of this sounds like it has nothing to do with our connection to the Jewish community, but the reality is, the more proactive we are when it comes to cybersecurity and digital security, the less risk we face being Jews online, and the easier it is for us to advocate as Jews on behalf of our community. And likewise, these best practices then translate to our allyship with other communities who are facing similar oppression online. And so if we up our digital personal cybersecurity game, we go a long way to ensuring that we have a much stronger foundation for combating the anti-Semitism that increasingly targets us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Carmi. You didn't say just throw all your devices away, which would be where I'd start.
As much, sometimes I joke, it would be, lovely to just go live in the digital equivalent of a cave. But the truth, and of course, we would be very secure then. The problem there is that then we can't use these tools in the powerful way that we want. And so we can have that balance. We just have to take a little bit of time to make sure that we're properly positioned.
Well, thank you very much for that. It was very thorough. I'm going to give my first question to Ryan, and then give Anita a chance to come in. Because it was a question sent to me the minute that this event was advertised. The first question's over a week ago, Ryan. And this was from someone who wrote a very sincere note saying, "My kids are concerned. Should I now take the mezuzah off my door?"
Yeah, that's a great question. So our mission statement is to protect Jewish life and Jewish way of life. We think both are equally important. I have seen no information to indicate that you are at greater risk with that mezuzah on your door. What I will say is, and it may be corny or cliched, but once you start taking those identifiable symbols of Jewish life away, they've started to win. So I personally would not, but that is a personal decision.
Well, from the CAEF perspective, we want to encourage people to stand as proud Jews. So we would agree with you. Anita, do you want to take it from here with a couple of questions?
Well, thank you. That was really fascinating. And we've gotten a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to combine a couple of them. Perhaps I'll start with one to Carmi, Levy, in reverse order, if you will. A couple of the questions are dealing with the reality of life on social media. We're encountering that it is a vehicle to spread lies and misinformation. And there's a perception, at least, that the social media giants aren't doing a great job of responding to complaints. One question talks about Wikipedia, which is something we actually noticed, how much anti-Semitism is on there, how much anti-Israel content is, and lack of response. Another listener is asking about Facebook and Twitter. They find that they'll censor disagreement on political issues, but online anti-Semitism in particular, when it's focused on Israel, seems to get a pass. Another listener talked about Instagram and wondering about where's the line these days between free speech and hate incitement. So the question, I think, generally is, how is social media doing in balancing this? Is it a source for incitement that should reflect on community security and policing? And perhaps you might even want to bring in, does Bill 10, which has just passed the first rung, make any changes, and anything there that we should be looking to? Big
Well,
question.
yeah. I wish I could say that social media, that the tech giants are doing a great job, and that they've introduced technologies that will protect us all in a fair and balanced way. But the truth of the matter is that's not the case. Facebook and Twitter and others have fallen far short of the bar where we need them to be. And I think we all have a role to play. They all have tools built into their platforms that when we see something that is objectionable, we can tag it. Sometimes they will take it down after we tag it. They will do an investigation. They do have artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation that's built into the platform that can scan and verify the validity of the source of a particular claim. They also have thousands of human moderators who then take their cues from this automation and then do further investigation and can choose to remove content if they wish. But that process doesn't happen unless we flag it as citizens. So we should become familiar with how to tag things through those menus attached to every piece of content. That's part of the role that we play. Should we dive into a virulent conversation where people are picking apart Israel? I don't believe so. And again, this reflects the real world. Would I dive into a seething crowd chanting anti-Israel comments, or would I find my own way to tell the truth? And I think that's what we need to do. Is when you see this, ask yourself, what is the proper story? How do I tell that story best? Don't just think you have to dive in and counter it. Use those tools to your best ability. Go into the forums where you're comfortable. Share pieces of truth that you feel support your narrative, and make sure that your level of volume is higher than theirs. I know it sounds somewhat trite, but that's the way to do it. We're certainly not going to change other people's minds. And at the same time, I think we also need to recognize the regulatory environment has been sadly lacking up until now. Governments have failed to keep up with technology racing ahead to ensure that the framework for their appropriate use is supported in legislation. Bill C-10, the update to the Broadcast Act, long overdue, is kind of meant to address that. The problem here is that they've removed protections for user-generated content. And now the risk here is that something that you post, a video to YouTube, for example, now the CRTC, if this goes ahead, and now it's the Senate is setting up to review it, the Senate can now, or the CRTC, our national regulator, is in position to decide whether in fact is or is not acceptable. Some questions about free speech, and we'll certainly have to watch for it, but truth of the matter is, these are still tools that are available to us to use as we see fit. Figure out what lanes work best for you and then cultivate them as best you can. Don't sort of target directly. I don't think that's constructive. It simply adds fuel to the fire. Find other ways to do so and use the tools that are already built into the platform to flag things as you come across them.
Thank you. Anita?
Well, and perhaps now a question to Superintendent Veerappan. There's a number of questions that are trying to understand the right steps involved in reporting to the police and to the community, and I suppose even in social media. Who do you go to first? And what I think one of the questions asks along the lines of, when do you go to the police? Do you see perhaps some people wandering outside the synagogue with a few signs, but there's no imminent threat, but you're worried about where it's going? Who do you report to and what are the right steps? Perhaps even what evidence should you be collecting? Maybe we could start off with Superintendent Veerappan to sort of walk us through what to do.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question, Anita. And I think it goes back to just starting off just with in terms of empowering ourselves as members of the community is knowing your local police service, knowing how to connect with them, knowing how to call 911, and knowing the non-emergency numbers as well. Also knowing, like I said, the getting a report number and all of those very, very important things. When it comes to situations like this, certainly if there's any concern for safety and security, please call the police. This is really the role of the police. Our role is really looking at all of these incredible complexities that happen around the world. And like I said, ultimately it distills down to issues of safety and security for all members of our community. People certainly have the right to protest. People have the right to express their views, but not when it infringes upon the rights of others and not when it causes criminal violations, right? So what I would say is that if there's any safety and security issues, please connect to the police. If it's imminent, if it's something that's related to an issue of safety and security, please use the 911 line if it's an emergency situation. Beyond that, I would also say, in York Region, one of the things that we found tremendous value in is having partnerships like we do, for example, with Ryan Clow and his team through UJA Federation. They, with their security teams, with the knowledge and the expertise that they have, and also understanding some of the intricacies and the very many nuances within our Jewish communities, it's very, very helpful to us at York Regional Police, because sometimes Ryan and his team may get this information before they'll connect with us, and they will also do an assessment because they're experts in this field as well. So I would say the first step, though, if you come across anything, any vandalism, any type of criminal offense against property or persons, contact the police. Once you contact the police, get a name and a badge number of the officer that's attending, get a report number, and that incident will be followed up with a call from an investigator as we investigate hate crime. Certainly keep all of that information readily available. There's many other ways prior to something like that happening that people can get engaged in. For example, I spoke about the camera registry program, which we have at York Regional Police. It's available to community members. And my contact information will be at the end, I believe at the end of this. Please connect with me if I can be of any assistance in guiding you through that program, through the York Regional Police website. Connect with some of the security agencies, particularly like teams that Ryan Clow and his team work with, because they are the experts. And sometimes if people may not feel comfortable contacting the police, at least reach out to someone like Ryan. One of the things Ryan mentioned earlier on, and I think I'd like to stress that again, is that if you do come across any type of hateful anti-Semitic graffiti or hate symbols or any instance where someone is being targeted, where their safety and security is at risk, please contact the police immediately. And the reason I say this is because sometimes people may send out something on social media. They may connect with other people. It goes, it could be sent on to a news outlet. We may see this on just through watching the news without even realizing that something has happened in our community. Like, we will respond promptly when we get these types of calls. We just need people to report it to us. Unfortunately, we can't be everywhere, but certainly when there's any threats to safety and security, contact the police immediately if that's the case.
If I could just hop in for a quick minute and just reinforce what Ricky said, always contact the police, especially if it's an emergency. Call 911. Often what I find is that we interpret or suppose what the law is or what the process is, and then we make decisions based on our understanding of what it is or what it should be. You're not going to get in trouble for calling 911. If you feel that there's a threat to life or safety, you need to call 911. The police will figure it out. That is their job, is to investigate and to respond. What we can offer for people is, you've made that report, you still feel like there's a threat, 911 has been called, police are on the way. We can work with you about training, for example, on lockdowns and how you can keep yourself safe until the police arrive. We can also work with you on how to report, what information to take, what the police are going to be looking for.
Ryan, just to follow up on that, because one of the audience is an American, and she's asked, who do you call in the US after you call the police? Would you say the federation in every city, if there is a federation, or do you have a way of identifying other Jewish organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a fantastic resource in the US. It's called Secure Community Network. They are the security organization for the Jewish federations of North America. So we have a strong partnership with them, as well as other security directors in Canadian cities. Secure Community Network has support security directors and federations. They also have regional security managers. If you want to get in contact with them, contact your local federation, find out if you have a security director there. If you do, find out if they're plugged into Secure Community Network. That would be the quickest way to find them.
Thank you.
To follow up on that, one of the questions I think is going towards community responses. So, Brian, what do you think about groups such as, well, I won't name groups, but groups that are forming as a sort of a Jewish community watch groups? How do you work with them? How do they relate to the police? What should be our response? There seems to be in the questions a lot of concerns that there's a lot of hate in the rallies that we're seeing against the Jewish community. And some of it we know have spilled back onto the streets into our neighborhoods. And as a result, people are looking for self-help community security groups. What would you have to say on that? And perhaps even Superintendent Veerappan could reflect on that.
Yeah, so I would say we can't control the other side. We can only control our own reaction. I think our own reaction has to take into account principles and values of Canadian society, but also has to be respectful of Canadian law. With UJA, we strive to ensure that we're both an effective organization that teaches best practices that are rooted in official sources or lessons learned from other community security and their tragedies. We work tirelessly with police to ensure not only are we transparent and that we coordinate with them as the lawful authority for criminal investigation and the first touch point for the criminal justice system. And I think that's the best model.
Thanks. If I could just add to what Ryan spoke about as well. I know one of the things, one of the concerns we've had here in York Region was victimization on a Saturday. For example, during the Sabbath, someone is violated, or someone comes across is subjected to some type of a hateful incident or some type of an anti-Semitic hate crime or hate incident. Recognizing that some people may not want to use their cell phones. We've had discussions about that. Certainly, we would want to get those reports as soon as possible, especially if it's if it's an emergency, 911. But again, these are some of the discussions that we've had also with Ryan's group and some of the very helpful ways that his organization can help educate police, because we're always learning about cultural diversity and all of the wonderful complexities of cultural diversity. So, it may not be the Sabbath, maybe, for example, it could be a member of the Muslim community, or something that happens on a Friday, or a community that has Sunday as their special day, or their day of significance. The point is that, during a time like this, when people have set aside this time for prayer as a significant day for prayer and commemoration and reflection within a particular community, we would hope that all of their attention can go towards that, and they shouldn't have to worry about safety and security at times like that. Unfortunately, that's not the reality right now. And so we do everything that we can, like I said, working in partnership to ensure that we try to understand those nuances and educate that onto our officers, again, through partnerships like what we have with Ryan's team.
It's a follow-up to Superintendent Veerappan then. A couple questions we're asking, what is a good response to countering the hate that we're seeing? There's two parts to this question, but the first part would be, what is a good response? Is it advertising? I know that the York Regional Police have had, and I was actually involved with a couple of the videos promoting, a hate-free community. There certainly seems to be a perception that we're not doing enough in terms of laying hate crime charges and allowing way too much hate symbols on the street and certainly online. What's the right response from, perhaps this is open to all of you, how do we counter this hate within the realm of your police work, within the realm of your community work, within the realm of your social media, given today's virulent, seeming unending stream of hate coming from us from all ends? What's the right response? How do we measure what we're doing and how do we respond to it? Big question.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to start just with I look at everything through a technology lens, and we live in an unprecedented chapter of history where we have the most sophisticated tools of connectivity ever created. And so, yes, like by all means, we should be using all of the levers of the law to bring those who spread hate to account. But just as importantly, like again, as Jews, we subscribe to the notion of tikkun olam, and so we ask ourselves the question, this is it's a terrible scenario. There's lots of hatred floating around. What are the things that we can do? How can we use these technologies to begin the process of fixing this? And I know it sounds simplistic, but my answer has been, I reach out to members, not just of my community, but of others. And so, when you see hatred online, ask yourself, who in another minority community should I be talking to now? Who can I reach out to? How do I start dialogue, both on a one-to-one basis and over time on a group basis? The power is built into these tools. It's really up to us to reach out and do that. So, because if all we're doing is filing complaints and investigating crimes, are we really moving toward resolution? Are we really sort of addressing the root causes of why this kind of activity happens in the first place? Again, it may seem overly simplistic, but given sort of my focus on technology and tools, it's kind of what I got.
Thank you. If I could just follow on Carmi's comments. Thank you very much, Carmi, for those comments. And I truly agree. When we're dealing with anti-Semitic hate crime or anti-Semitic incidents, it should not only be members of the Jewish community that are outraged. We should all be outraged. This is our community. Hate crime is a violation against all of us. And it should, we're dealing with anti-Semitic, we're dealing with anti-Black hate crime, it shouldn't only be members of the Black community. So what Carmi is speaking about is something that we've been working towards. And ultimately, it's about peace building. As a police organization, we do a lot of work in peacemaking because that's part of what we do, get in the middle of conflict and separate people. And Ryan's team's probably very familiar with that as well. We do a lot of work in the area of peacekeeping, just by being visible in the community and the prevention of crimes. But there's also great opportunities for peace building, right? And who are the other people that are also targeted by hate crime? Maybe not anti-Semitic, maybe it's anti-Indigenous, maybe it's Islamophobic, maybe it's homophobic, maybe it's Islamophobic. But who are those people that are also targeted? Because hate crime impacts many, many communities who are sometimes considered vulnerable or considered marginalized, sometimes ostracized. And it's important to find opportunities to work together, because the stronger we, by working together, we can have incredible strength as a community in combating hate, right? The police can only do so much. And as Ryan said, just previously, he said, there are things that are beyond our control, but how we respond to them, how we plan and how we strategize to respond to them is what's going to make the difference, right? So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I would just say to that, what are you doing to help or to make change? And I think rather than looking at this as like table service and pointing fingers as to what somebody else is doing or not doing, treat it like a buffet. Get up, go find a productive outlet or a way that you can support and contribute. Because as Ricky said, as Carmi said, like these are attacks on us all. This is an attack on Canadian society, Canadian principles and values. And the more we do, rather than waiting for somebody else to do, the further we will get, and we'll actually get to some sort of resolution. But find a productive outlet, not an one full of anger or hate of your own.
We've gone a little bit over time. I'm going to suggest, though, that Anita have one more question. And then what we will do is all of the questions are being recorded. I'm going to go back to our panelists with the questions, get their answers, and we will post the responses when we post this recorded webinar, if you don't mind, gentlemen. And then we'll have tried to deal with everything people are concerned about. Okay. So Anita, what's the last question?
Well, the pressure, there's so many good questions that are still there. And thank you everybody for contributing. And I think a lot of the questions are expressing a frustration. We, as a community, we're feeling very much under the gun. I know every time I open up media or even my own feed, I feel that. And so security is very much on the line, on the tops of everybody's minds. But thank goodness we have people like you helping us. I think the last question that I'd asked is, what do we do about the ongoing rallies that are on our streets that we just don't seem to be able to stop, and yet they're so full of hate? This includes campus concerns, as one of our listeners asked about, where Hezbollah and Hamas banned terrorist groups or flags are flying and students are sent running. It includes rallies on the street where an ex-police chaplain gets up and incites hatred by calling, at a peace rally, talks about the Middle East, and the implication is that it's all the Jews' fault. There's a perception that the police aren't doing enough. There's a perception that the community is not doing enough. There's certainly a perception that social media giants are failing. What should we be doing to deal with these imminent and in our face threats?
Yeah,
Ryan?
okay, that's a that's a bit of a hot potato there. What can we do? I think, as I go back to my previous answer, was, what are you doing? If you're not doing anything, that would be the first place I would start, to find a way for it to be productive. I think, second of all, and I understand frustration and I understand anger. We need to understand what we're actually angry about. So often I find things said about police, things said about other things that just aren't true, because we don't understand what the law is. We don't understand how it's applied. We don't understand where the actual points of pressure need to be applied. So that's why I would say, seek out and find that productive outlet. If you are really interested in a political type issue, go find your contact at CJA, find out what CJA is up to and how you can contribute. If your concern is about how policing and anti-Semitism is being handled, contact someone like Ricky and find out, as you mentioned, what the advisory council is, maybe for your local police force, and how you can get involved. If you're concerned about your personal safety or that of your friends, family, or loved ones, contact a group like mine and find out what training you can undertake, or what support we can provide to you as a community member or as a community organization. Again, I'll go back to, as much as we want to point a finger, let's look in the mirror first.
I think that's a really tough question, but I think Anita's given some specifics, certainly that CAEF has been monitoring. When you see virtual events that are hosted by university organizations that are demonizing Israel, it's a threat. When you see riots on the street, as we've seen in Vancouver and Ottawa recently, with Hezbollah flags and people chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means eradicate the country and kill the Jews. Nobody is stopping that. What do we need? Do we need laws in Canada that will be enforced so that when we say we adopt IRA, we really do something about it? I mean, this is a tough one, but I don't think we should evade the question.
No, I don't think either. I think laws happen through advocacy, and so if we're going to change laws, then we have to work through advocacy groups to put pressure on the government to be able to create the laws we think we need. What I will say is, hate is not illegal in Canada. To hate someone is not an illegal act. Right. There are actual hate crimes in the criminal code, but in the broad majority, hate motivation is used as a sentencing provision. Generally, the line with hate is whether it invokes violence. And as a result, to preserve democratic principles, we end up having to tolerate some things that are unpalatable or uncomfortable. What I would say is, if go back and find out what your concern is, where it matters most to you, and then find an outlet, a productive outlet to become involved and be part of the change.
So to Superintendent Veerappan, in response to this particular question someone is raising, well, tell us very pointedly, what can the police do to stop these kinds of open rallies on the street? Do you have the tools you need? Do you need more tools? What can you do to restore public confidence?
Yeah, Anita, thank you very much again, and I'll build on what Ryan said, because you made some really good points. Ultimately, it starts with connecting with the police, letting us know. Like if you're familiar, if you're aware of an event or some type of rally that's going to be taking place, and we know we've had these relationships with members of the Jewish communities previously, connect with us. Let us know. We've had that relationship with other communities as well, where an event is going to be taking place and they contact with the local police. Depending on the numbers of people expected, certainly we get our public safety unit engaged. We've got a full-time public safety unit that is very, very attuned to policing with a global mindset. And by that, again, I mean understanding how some of the critical events happening around the world impact safety and security for residents within our communities in York Region. So connect with us. We will put you in touch with a public safety unit. They will come out, they will do the audits, the assessments, and determine what resources they need. We also have a hate crime unit, as I mentioned previously, and the hate crime unit, apart from everyday incidents and criminal offenses that are happening that are flagged with hate, they are also experts in looking at issues of hate propaganda. And as you know, in Canada, there's 3 sections in the criminal code that speak to hate propaganda. One is the advocating genocide, one is public incitement of hatred, and that's certainly willful promotion of hatred. And advocating genocide and willful promotion of hatred are very, very lengthy, complex investigations, because there's so many pieces to those puzzles, and it also requires the consent of the Attorney General. But again, even through all of that, this is the question that you posed has many, many layers to it. And I think Ryan's addressed a few of them. But essentially, from a policing perspective, when it comes to public safety and security, we look at it at a grassroots level. What are we doing on the ground in terms of patrols, in terms of notification of police officers, in terms of getting our public safety units engaged to monitor these types of events, to ensure that the safety and security of all people engaged in that is the number one priority, right? So, like I said, ultimately it starts off with that call to police, and over time we've even had meetings, we've set up meetings to ensure that we gather all the facts, we make sure we put people in touch with the right connections at York Regional Police, and certainly if there's criminal offenses that need to be investigated, then we will we prosecute criminal offenses, particularly hate crime, to the full extent of the law.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ricky, Ryan, Carmi. This has been most enlightening. I think that it has generated a lot more questions. So as I said earlier, we will try to get back to everybody. And I thank everyone who's participated today, and thank you for attending. And please watch for the next bulletin. We will have another session, another webinar next week, and I'll give you advance notice because there is a connection between this one and the next. Rabbi Carrie Kosberg will speak next Wednesday on Jewish ethics around self-defense. So please stay tuned, watch for the notice. And thank you again, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Stay well.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.